I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to Chapter 6, Act 1 of my Law series. Right, let's have a few reminders of where we are now.
It's year 984-11. Mephistopheles is in District 20, a district where being able to display colour of any kind was a privilege that most couldn't afford. A district that looks like it was patterned on Victorian London, right down to the air pollution, exploitative work practices, and the buildings. The main difference being that technology was used to really allow the factory owners to tighten their grip on their workforce. And on top of the pile in District 20, at least when an arbiter or claw isn't involved, is T-Corp, a wing that takes the expression "time is money" literally, as their singularity time track allows them to commercialize time, where it allowed Lobotomy Corporation to invert time. Yes, invert time to rewind it all the way back to day one, if they needed to do so, along with reverse time dilation that allowed Lobotomy Corporation to complete the Seed of Light project in 10 years on the outside, which, if it was done in real time, it would have taken closer to 10,000 years. Other applications of T-Corp singularity include reverse time dilation for R-Corp to get around the law that makes it legal for more than one of the same individual from existing at the same time for a week in real time, as this would allow for a lengthy battle royale situation where all the clones until only a few, the best of the clones, remained in the space of R-Corp's facility after 3 to 12 months of time track-based reverse time dilation, depending on how urgently they were needed. As for W-Corp, it prevents the warp train passengers from dying of thirst, hunger, disease, injury, or even old age during a journey that from the outside takes 10 seconds, but to them, it would be many centuries of hell. T-Corp had a box installed in the warp trains that stores that time for other purposes. The Circle of Nine, the original one, moved there from District 19, when it made itself more inviting to those that would invent and develop technology. Those that submit their technology to be patented would lose control over how it was used, something that the League of Nine feared would happen, which is why they didn't do so with any technology developed in their own time. Sadly, T-Corp looked ahead, and seeing that there's not enough criminals to crack down on, they decided to make them by making a law that made the League of Nine illegal, where private research groups with more than 5 members needed to register with T-Corp, and any technologies developed without registration will be confiscated. Yes, confiscated by collectors, who are T-Corp's enforcers. Yes, enforcers of their rule over District 20. The collectors also act as intermediaries of T-Corp, such as, well, for example, making a deal with Dong Rang to offer him a place within K-Corp in exchange for him selling the League of Nine out. Now that we've gone over what District 20 is known for, and what is known about it so far, let's start going over Chapter 6 proper. Yes, Chapter 6. As Chapter 5.5 made clear, this will be Heathcliff's story. The story of a former thug with anger management issues, where he needs to head to Wuthering Heights for an occasion on a specific day at a specific time. Kathy, someone that Heathcliff wants to impress, especially wants him to be there. He also wanted to get some clothes to look presentable. He even stole some hair salon coupons, unknowingly from a big brother of the middle, to get his hair done, which he wasn't able to use as he didn't arrive at the port ship that those coupons were valid for. It wasn't on their chartered course. So far, they've dealt with relics from the past, a heist that ended with them being chased by a kaiju-sized abnormality underneath a casino. They went to a town of the condemned, was in the middle of a dispute between corpos and activists, a dangerous voyage at sea, and now they're going through a place that's even more dark, dreary, and dangerous than, well, pretty much anywhere else they've been so far. A few that commented on the trailer for Season 4 compared it to Birmingham, England. And I can say with quite a bit of confidence that it isn't off by much. And I'm from Birmingham. But no, due to the pollution above that district and the appearance of the buildings, it's more like Victorian London, and everything that comes with it. I mean, some parts of it being worse, as they have technology in District 20 that they definitely didn't have in Victorian London. As for how Chapter 6 starts, it starts with a female voice. The voice of Kathy, one who was apparently close to Heathcliff, telling him to come back to the manor where the last vestiges of its beauty remain are its violet flowers, to the manor where its storm-broken breach has siphoned all that was once warm, to the manor that gave him not only life but also scorn and desolation, to the manor where his place was the frozen corner that couldn't be any farther from the hearth. Return from the moors. It's time for you to come home. Me, how did Heathcliff survive long enough to run away from that place? And that's just based on the hint of the environmental hazards of it. Anyway, we snap back to Dante, who noted that was what the nest of T-Corp was like. They had surprisingly little trouble making it past the immigration check. Their concerns were unfounded, likely remembering Don Quixote making things harder for them in District 10 and 11. That, and there was the concern that Yi Sang was still a wanted man in District 20. Ishmael was surprised about that, as, well, there was no trouble getting past the next checkpoint. Don Quixote saw this as a compliment, and that it was unnecessary, likely remembering what happened the last time she caused trouble at a checkpoint. Gregor was confused, as they didn't see anything. Roger said that she's grown so much. Yes, Don Quixote certainly has. Dante noted that they all seemed relaxed for having just entered a different nest, likely growing used to it by now. Standard procedure for them. the general sentiment among them. Well, except for Heathcliff. Dante asked if they're heading for Wuthering Heights next. The glum expression on Heathcliff's face made it clear that complicated concerns were weighing down on him. He confirmed this. He was staring at the colourless scenery as they were moving through the nest. What was getting to him was beyond the buildings that Mephistopheles was driving past. Ishmael emphasizes the wuthering part of Wuthering Heights, seeing that manor as possibly one that was built on a windy hill. Heathcliff confirmed this. He never knew comfort as long as he was there, and the dark tone of his voice was clear as he spoke that. This was unusual for him. This was noticeable to the damned dozen, and they started to chat him up. Yi Sang spoke of the return to one's homeland as something that brings forth quite the tangled mass of emotions. Heathcliff questioned this. He wasn't born in Wuthering Heights, he was raised there. Although, while this made it passable for a homeland to him, it's debatable. Even so, Yi Sang wanted clarification. Heathcliff had a dark look on him as he told him that he has no idea how many times he's imagined it, playing it out in his head, returning to that bloody manor, smashing every living thing in that place to bits until there's nothing left. Yes, we're likely to find out how bad that place would have to be for him to want to do that to that place. Ishmael asked what he'd do after that, asking if he really learned nothing from watching what she had to go through at the lake. Heathcliff did learn something, that if he ever lost the plot and pushed himself to the brink of no return, he'd trust that one of them would pull him right out of it. Ishmael was asking if he was giving her permission to beat some sense into him. Heathcliff confirmed this, if that's what it took. Ryushu was asking how far was he allowing them to go with bodily harm. Amputation? Nerve mutilation? Seriously, Ryushu, I suspect that he was thinking in terms of physically restraining him or knocking him out cold. Sinclair had the right idea, asking if they should smack his head hard. This discussion on how to knock some sense into Heathcliff was starting to annoy him. It wasn't an invitation to use him as an emotional punching bag. He wasn't in the mood. Honglu believed that his present self could do this. Heathcliff wanted to know what he meant by that. Honglu told him that his present self was depraved, poor, and had nothing left. This angered Heathcliff, as Honglu apparently skipped past the pleasantries and went straight into personal insults. Then Honglu stopped him there. He took his words the wrong way. Now, Honglu was far from talkative, but when he did speak, he usually had something insightful to say. But he was prone to misunderstandings, as he doesn't say it in a way that's immediately obvious. And made it clear to Heathcliff that he said it in a way that, well, they're all depraved, and that can change a lot of things. There are things that can only be noticed when you're left with nothing, or at least practically nothing. Don Quixote asks if that poverty explains their current and sightly lack of colourfulness. And she was mournful as she said this. She was about to cry. Everything was drained of colour the moment they entered the nest of District 20. More colours were taken away since then, Rodio's wondering when they'd bring that up, hoping that the colours would come back soon. Or so she thought 10 hours before. She was angered, asking if they're going to be colourless forever. In that gloomy hue for the rest of their lives. She's lost her appetite seeing food in that sepia hue, even losing the will to live. Everything was in a sickly brown hue. Meat looks rotten in that colour. Well, it'll likely last as long as you're in the nest of District 20. Gregor saw this as an overreaction. Rodia was annoyed by these guys. Specifically those outside that have colour in their clothes. Yes. Faust noted that a sufficient amount of payment must have been made in order to retrieve those colours. And this was spoken on 23 separate occasions. Heathcliff saw it in his coat, his trousers, and didn't see that bloke as even that loaded. Only trying to come off as though he was. Those that are that loaded spare no cash to get every single colour back, even to trivial trinkets like the rims of their glasses. Hong Lu asked if he also had to live without colour when he lived there. Heathcliff said no. The manor had some colour, but it was far from vibrant. We usually saw it as the colour of blood should have remained red. Heathcliff said that poor sod is making himself a target wandering around with that look, as he has enough colour to invite the bandits but not enough to keep them away. Dante saw this as a prediction that was correct, as right on cue, a number of thieves surrounded the bloke who passed himself off as loaded and started bashing him on the head, specifically the back of it. Don Quixote saw them as shameless villains, preying on a weak civilian like a pack of hyenas. So you've seen hyenas where you're from. Hong Lu asked if they're a gang. This didn't impress Heathcliff, as to that former thug, the gangs of District 20 have seen better days. Not even seeing them as a gang, more like lowlives running out of time. Last time he was there, scum like them would infest the streets so brazenly. Dante asked if there are gangs that weren't scummy. Heathcliff confirmed that there was. The one he was in would never dogpile on some poor, unarmed blokes like that. Charon then wanted to vroom vroom, but couldn't, as there was a roadblock. Virgilius understood that the situation wouldn't resolve itself quickly, telling the damned dozen to take care of them, in an organized crime hitman kind of way, before Don Quixote complains. Don Quixote then thanked him for letting them enact justice. Roger understood that he was starting to catch on with what to do in this situation. He laughed briefly, not wanting to talk about this farther than he needed to. Then they got out of the bus to bring lethal judgment to the scum within the nest of District 20. A nice warm-up after their time without combat. That wasn't the mirror dungeon or the Luxcavations. Clearly, whatever was draining colour was what T-Corp saw as an opportunity, where they sell a solution to a problem that they've either created or have exploited. As for Heathcliff's syndicate, it was clearly one with standards, based on his reaction. They appeared to be those that fought those that were actually capable of fighting back. A more urgent T-Corp gangster told those gits to go away. This one's theirs. Seeing as they're running low on time as well. Not seeing as their problem. They've only got 30 minutes themselves. A more scared T-Corp gangster was concerned if they're one of the dead rabbits. Gregor was confused by what they meant by 30 minutes. A more urgent T-Corp gangster was unconcerned. The old dead rabbits and their vigilante ways are no more. All they do now is stare at you funny from behind their old masks. And this was confusing to Heathcliff, and he knew them. The masks were certainly new to him. The scared T-Corp gangster considered this to be a big load of They've got no time for this. They should kill him quickly. Then they rushed at the damned dozen with bloodshot eyes, not giving Heathcliff a chance to finish. And so the fighting began proper. This revealed that the dead rabbits, as Heathcliff remembered, used to be vigilantes. They were organised criminals, yes, but they fought against those that weren't defenceless, delivering justice in ways that the Fixer Associations either couldn't or wouldn't. At least not unless you're paying them enough to do so. Heathcliff, after smashing the gangsters' skulls in, drew attention to himself and complimented the civilian's hat, asking where he got it. This made this overly dramatic civilian go all the way to Brown Alert, apologising to him, saying that he could take everything, take as much as they want, offering his watch. Don Quixote understood that he's got the wrong idea about this, not helped by how threatening Heathcliff appeared. He certainly appeared as the villain here. This caused Heathcliff to explain that he was just complimenting his sharp fashion choices. Clearly he was overreacting. This didn't make the civilian relax, saying that it's everything that he had. He didn't have enough money even for ransom. And that's if they were to kidnap him. Pleading with that he has family. They're waiting for him at home. Well, thankfully for him, they're not those that would do that. At most, they just want information on the current state of affairs in the nest of District 20. Dante understood that there was more thieves out there in the dark alleyways that might see them as potential targets. One such thief was attracted by what was going on there, seeing loads of time on them, one of them demanding 15 minutes. Gregor questioning why they're obsessed with time, the thief telling them that they won't give it up willingly. So, they'll kill them and take that clock for themselves. Dante realizing that they were referring to them. Okay then, time for more skulls to be smashed in. After defending this colourful bystander from more gangsters, Heathcliff pressured him for information, who continued to his pants. And this made Heathcliff snap at him, telling him to be quiet or he'll attract more of them. Even telling him to shut his gob or they'll feed him to the meat grinder back at the rickety cannibal bus. And just to remind you, that's how Mephistopheles refuels on enkephalin, and it's more effective if those that it feeds on are still alive. The overdramatic civilian got the message, understanding that they're not there to kidnap him. This is starting to get annoying to Gregor, telling him that they're not there to kidnap him. Don Quixote agreeing with this, telling them that they're She was struggling to come up with something that won't get them into trouble. Certainly not with Virgilius. Never mind anyone else that matters. She settled for the passerbys of justice, mentioning that Heathcliff can be rather brutish in his manner of speech, and this made the overdramatic civilian more at ease. Honglu wanted to know why they're asking them for time, not money. Rodier believed that time is just another commodity to be bought and sold there. Yeah, I did say that T-Corp would take the expression time is money more literally, as that's what their singularity manipulates. This was making Ishmael restrain her annoyance, asking if it's just her again, asking if no one read the T-Corp pamphlet guide. I'm starting to think they're doing this on purpose. At least with District 21, they need to ask her, as she was a local and knew that region better than any of them. Thankfully, she wasn't the only one that knew about how things worked there. Heathcliff was a local there, and Yi Sang used to live there. The latter explained that in T-Corp, or Time Track Corporation, yes, I really need to get better at English. Its civilians use timepieces as personal identification. They often trade with time instead of physical currency, which their timepieces can deal in such transactions. Most labourers there are paid in time. Ishmael let it slide this time due to Yi Sang explaining this. Dante asked if this was going to be a problem, as only Urtius carried a watch. Honglu understood this to mean her broken wristwatch. He thought it was a neat fashion statement. Urtius took offence to this, as it wasn't a fashion statement, seeing it as insolent of him to assume that. It's likely something to do with her past, and it was a sensitive subject, based on her snapping at Honglu. Then Gregor asked the civilian what made him so freaked out about a kidnapping earlier. He then explained that there's a pretty scary rumour of indiscriminate kidnappings going around the streets of that nest, abandoned streets, which was why when he saw a dozen or more running around together, he was scared that there might be an infamous kidnapping syndicate. Urtis wanted more details, specifically the who, when, where, what, how, and why. The civilian then continued his explanation. Apparently people had been going missing around there. Where they were was the last known location of a bunch of missing people. Everyone has become a shut-in during the foggy days, as they didn't want to be kidnapping. Yeah. Low visibility is only good for those that want to prey on targets without them being seen. Yes, so they don't see them coming until it's too late. It was even on the front page of the Times newspaper. Oh, so that's still around even in that grim dark future. The front page said, "Mysterious kidnapping, fear sweeps nest. Not even a body found." Or more specifically, not even a single body found. Yes, and he offered this newspaper for them to read, understanding that they need to know this, as most of them are clearly not local. Masot, Rodia, and Don Quixote were reading the sensationalized titles and articles on that newspaper. Masot had little to say about that. Rodia was more interested in an award-winning eatery not far from there. Typical Rodia, always thinking with your stomach. Don Quixote was more interested in time retrieval fixes, confirming what they said in their interviews. Dante was asking them if they're reading the same article. Heathcliff noticed the difference and admitted that he was right. That civilian was. There's a lot less people around there than he remembered. The street should be packed with workers heading to their factory jobs and inventors selling useless trinkets. It's never been that empty. Dante saw this empty street, thick with fog, which seemed to be getting thicker due to the lack of colour. Otis was reminded of the kidnapping rumour that they heard when they were working on the Blade lineage case. Ishmael was seeing that kidnapping, specifically from a human trafficking syndicate, as more believable. Well, considering the Twin Hook pirates, I don't blame you. And there might be one roaming that area. Heathcliff hasn't heard of any such syndicates, at least not while he lived there. Massault saw it as statistically impossible for them to operate without leaving any evidence behind. At least one would be able to escape them, especially with how prolific they were, to the point when they're discouraging the public from leaving their homes. I mean, at least one body would have been found. Sinclair was concerned that this was worse than the usual murders if no bodies were left behind. Honglu believed that it'd be more dangerous the more they looked into it. Dante observed that this wasn't business as usual here, that there's more to this than they think, possibly a more powerful organization pulling the strings. Rodier saw this as a lot of conjecture from the fact that no bodies were found. Sinclair wanted to know what she meant by that. Rodier reminded them of the night in the back streets. The sweepers would leave nothing behind. Everything, including corpses, would have been completely cleaned up. Gregor agreed with this, even though Rodier saw it as scary that they clean up more than just what humans would see as refuse. Dante agreed with this and mentioned that the idea of sweepers freaked Sinclair out for a while. Sinclair told them that it's because Rodier kept making funny noises and sweeper expressions at him every night. As for paying and charging those within District 20 with time, there's something similar in other media. For example, the movie In Time is where everyone stops aging past 25 and given one free year to live. And as such, to keep the population in check, time is a universal currency, where most are racing to stay ahead of the clock, as when it reaches zero, they're dead. While the rich were incapable of running out, where it led to an even more unfair society than in our world, where there's segregation between those that are practically immortal and those that are barely staying ahead of death. Another example of time being currency is in the sci-fi sitcom Red Dwarf, where it's set 3 million years ahead, specifically with the episode M Core, not related to the one in District 15, let's make that clear, where it involved a mega corporation that bought ownership of the entire planet Earth and had a stranglehold on everything that they could. This was made possible due to them having a monopoly on power generation and even rainwater, along with establishing legislation that allowed them to tax thinking, as in that which would make it unaffordable to fight back. And they were also extortionately pricing a number of things, all to make those under their employ run out of money and then be charged in time, which rapidly aged them, which it did to the last human alive. Okay, I'll stop there. This is just to provide examples of this in other media, so I suspect that charging in time in T-Corp, as in that which is under their direct control, is actually quite mild compared to those two examples. Back on Mephistopheles, Sinclair was speaking of the mysterious case of missing persons in that street surrounded by a thick fog. Almost as scary as an urban legend. He tried to pass himself off as not scared, but failed miserably. He was clearly nervous, forcing himself to laugh. Gregor told him not to force himself to laugh. Roger didn't like this at all. They're that scared so soon after entering the nest, where it's supposed to be the safest part of a district. If the fathoms of ego of bamboo-hatted Kim is to be believed, District 19 is likely worse, as they invited the Kurokumo clan into that nest. Dante saw this as an unsettling story that's having everyone on edge, so they did the only thing that would make sense in that situation, asking Heathcliff to read out the invitation for them again, a reminder of their current mission, something that they needed as well. Heathcliff didn't see anything special about it, but complied anyway. Then we noticed that he had that invitation neatly folded, so he wasn't as aloof about it as he's making it out to be. Yes, it was folded with care, and then he read out the invitation. And as he got to the part where he mentioned that Neddy had it sent to him, Roger wanted him to read that last part, and Heathcliff said, to that, not seeing it as necessary, but he read it out anyway, saying, "You have to be there, Heath. I'll be waiting. Kathy." Gregor saw how this might mean to him. Roger was excited by this. Ishmael was not impressed, asking if they're a party crowd at a dive bar, seemingly the only one that's taking this seriously. Roger believed that this was what they were going for. Heathcliff wasn't even mad at them for this insensitivity, as he knew this would happen. He went on to say that she'll be waiting. She didn't say that she missed him or wanted to see him. Gregor commented on how she wrote that. Roger wanted to see that. They were conducting a literary analysis of the invitation letter. Dante believed that they were worrying too much. Sinclair was seeing them like those in school opening their first love letters. Roger was asking him if he was never interested in those things. Sinclair claimed to be a diligent student. He cared only for textbooks and lectures. Don Quixote noticed a blushing on him, which suggested otherwise. Sinclair claimed this due to genetics. Roger then asked Dante if they're interested in those things, and then remembered that wouldn't be appropriate to ask. This angered Dante, asking what was with her sorry look on her face. Mazzotte told her that there was no need for her sympathy. He was certain that there are those that appreciate their unique appearance. Okay, I doubt that the prosthetic head is the main problem. It's the lack of memory of having any experience in that area. That and their schedule is pretty full right now. This made Dante silent regardless. Then Yisang asked if it wasn't odd. Ishmael asked if it was odd that someone actually wrote Heathcliff a love letter. Ooh, that was uncalled for, even with him. Honglu then thought that was rude of Yisang to say, even though it was Ishmael that said that rude remark. That wasn't Yisang's intention. Apparently Ishmael was thinking the same thing, since they're not looking for a branch facility in District 20. That the Golden Bower is located in Wuthering Heights instead, where the Golden Bower's apparently been tracked down. That was what Yisang was intending to say. Virgilius was thankful for him bringing that up. He was starting to get tired of being the bringer of unpleasant news. He hoped that none of them were under the impression that they were heading to Wuthering Heights just because of Heathcliff's invitation. Those that were would be disappointed. Heathcliff said that if they're looking at the context that Nellie wrote that in, she's trying to say there was... Then Gregor interrupted him, saying otherwise. Well, he saw otherwise. Ishmael wanted to move on, get on with this. Faust spoke of a report from the before team that a golden bar had been observed. The location was narrowed down to somewhere within Wuthering Heights. This was significant, on account of the manor's unique security system that prevented them from conducting an on-site preliminary review, or even a survey. They've yet to identify the exact location. Well, that just means that they're determined that everywhere else was where it wasn't. This surprised Heathcliff, as he didn't remember anything like that since he... Well, at least when he was there. This made it even more odd to Ishmael. Yisang agreed, even though he wasn't aware of the monetary value and the public perception of its worth. The golden bar is not an item easily attainable. Certainly not to the extent that it can be housed in a normal private manor. Faust pointed out that it wasn't always inside the manor. Yisang understood that it was in the branch facility and was transferred there for reasons currently unknown to them. Ishmael understood Catherine to be a major part in this, as she has the golden bar all to herself, seeing her as confident, at least enough to believe that Heathcliff would come to the manor just to see her face, even if the golden bar wasn't there. This conversation wasn't registering to Heathcliff. He wanted to know if there was a barber shop or a boutique nearby. Virgilius reminded him that he was not on a tour bus. No unnecessary stops. Heathcliff told him to leave him behind and go on ahead. He'll catch up. Honglu then talked about watching the shops very closely. Not one of them was open, likely due to the rumours that they heard earlier, and the fog. Asking him to leave it up to him and Rodia. Heathcliff didn't know what he was talking about, and then, before he could react, they ran off somewhere. Clearly they had plans relevant to this, since Heathcliff stealing those hair salon coupons from Big Brother Ricardo of the Middle was all for nothing. They've been, having plans regarding this since their unscheduled excursion to the outskirts. The results were unclear at this point, although there is the question of how he'd be able to pay for that. This is considering that he threw his watch away when he left District 20, and I'm not sure about how he's actually paid for his services rendered. A nice warm welcome for Heathcliff, and this hasn't even got to the more hostile parts. Until next time, hail the rabbit!